Today, AI is changing how fast organizations can move, but speed alone doesn't create value.
What matters is how clearly teams can define the problem, align around outcomes, and make the right decisions before they accelerate.
I'm Clay Richardson, founder and CEO of Digital Fast Forward.
And I'm Steph Louis, Senior Director of Pega Community and Developer Engagement.
Each episode, we sit down with leaders and practitioners to explore what it really takes to design for value.
And find out how organizations are turning AI-driven speed into meaningful, measurable outcomes.
Welcome to Design to Accelerate.
Conversations on creating value in the age of AI.
Let's go. Welcome to another episode of Design to Accelerate. I'm your host, Clay Richardson, Chief Accelerator with Digital Fast Forward, and I'm joined by my co-host, Steph Louis.
Yes, thanks, Clay. I'm so excited to be here again, and I head up developer and community engagement at Pega. This episode is really exciting because it's the first time that we have a client and an expert besides us. I mean, yes, Alan and Krim, so forth, but someone that's actually taking this technology in the wild. That's right. So I'm also privileged because you and Reshma know each other. So Reshma Block joins us, who's the principal and founder of Compass Consulting. Reshma, introduce yourself to our amazing audience.
Hey,
thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. So I'm the current principal and founder of Compass Consulting, a digital boutique firm that really focuses on digital transformation. That's kind of how Clay and I met. But really, my background goes back maybe 30 years in tech now, starting at Intel in the Silicon Valley, a couple of startups here and there. And most recently, I was the CTO of what's now a private equity owned firm, Tricon Residential, but helped take them public a couple of years ago as well.
Yeah, and I love your introduction, but it almost downplays, when I listen to it. I've known Reshma, for probably like 10 years now, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
We've known each other for a while.
Pre-kids and some
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because, I think about Reshma, your background, and just you operating as CTO of publicly traded company, like some of the things we wanted to talk to you about is really the journey around solution design, but more getting inside of a CTO's head that has implemented Pega, has had success, has had challenges, right? And just having that conversation around A, the role of solution design, but then B, like, what does this begin to look like in the age of AI, right? And so to start, maybe just to kick off, how do you define solution design? I think we've been having this conversation internally. Like we've worked together on multiple solution design engagements. How do you define solution design, or what do you think of in terms of the definition?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it probably, changes depending on who you ask, right? I think fundamentally, to me, solution design is really starting with the business first. It's not picking the tools. It's not writing the requirements even. It's not doing a bunch of boxes. It's really understanding where is the business trying to go? What is the end goal for strategy? What is the end goal for outcomes? And then translating that business ambition to really a coherent, technical and operational architecture that can be ideated on, but maintained as well.
Wow, it's almost like Clay fed you those words because
we were having that's how long we've known each other.
But I think
that's funny.
It's really funny that you use the word ambition and like starting with what you're trying to achieve, and technology comes later, because that was a word that I hadn't thought of at the very beginning of the whole process of like starting with the business problem, the objective, but the word ambition is really unique to me that both of you used, that categorizes and it has a different emotion to it. So
it's interesting, and I'll just say the reason Reshma, like why she said that, is the model that I use is a transformation project that we worked on together. Right. And it's really based on that leader. So if we think about the head of she was the head of customer experience at the time, but she had this big ambition to transform how customer experience was done. a lot of people would say the solution design journey started after, right? Like, meaning she had this ambition and solution design started 6 months after everybody decided what it needed to be, right? It actually, if we think back to that time, solution design started as soon as she had the ambition.
Yep.
Like literally, you know, we can go into the whole story, but that's where I think a lot of people miss it. And I think you nailed it. And I think some of that I learned from you. So I would love to say like, you know, the smart guy, but I learned from people like Reshma, like, oh, we're doing solution design. So I love that.
And I think sometimes the hardest part is really even getting the business leader and executive to articulate what it is they want, right? Sometimes it's just about, this isn't working, guys, or we need to be able to do this better. The outcome focus is really, I think, the gold that you get to extract or try to extract before you ever try sticking in a tech or a tool or something, right? To go solve that, you know, granular pain point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with that aspect of it in the lens of solution design, did you think about that lens at the time, or I mean, kind of?
Oh, it's always in my brain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Solution design is kind of how I operate every day.
I think that's so unique, though.
That's really good.
And like, I think that's so unique to even think about that ambition translating solution design so early, even before you make the decision of build or buy or configure or something like that. And having that mindset change is, I think, a big shift that, you know, before talking to you, I didn't even think about until we started to have this conversation.
Yeah. I think, you know, and maybe it's because, you know, I grew up with an operational lens, right? I ran my parents' motel, 32-unit motel in LA, as the eldest of immigrants. And the operational mindset was really embedded in me in the most formative years of my life, right? And so as we're having conversations with executives, sitting down with Clay, you know, before we even take that tool set, I'm thinking, how can we operationalize this? What's this going to look like to the people in the call center? What's this going to look like to the front line, the technicians out in the field? How are they going to potentially want to feel about this as the executive achieves the outcomes? And so Clay's absolutely correct. Solution design starts way before, you know, you get to that tool set.
It's interesting too, because I have seen this pattern so much now. Like, solution design for me a lot of times happens over dinner. It's kind of weird. It starts over dinner. If you think about when the conversation we first had, right? And in terms of this, the company that we were helping, it actually started over a dinner where the head of CX, you remember, this was at, for anybody that lives in Southern California, it was at Vaca in Orange County. I remember this, right? And we just had a dinner, and it was like the executive, the leader that we were working with was like, hey, I want to transform CX. How do we start thinking about the journey and that ambition? She already had the ambition seed had already been there, but she just didn't have a way. How do I start having this conversation? How do I get my leaders involved? And for me, that I've seen this pattern. It's really weird now when I think about it, is like, it always starts over a dinner, right? Where the conversation goes. And so it's something for me to think about maybe a little bit more. Like,
you need to go out to eat more.
I either need to go out to eat more, or I need to stop talking business over dinner, right? I guess maybe thinking a little bit more about that, Reshma, how do you think about kind of the challenge of AI coming into that, right? Like, I think we had another guest conversation where the topic came up of like, as soon as that ambition comes up, you should open up, you know, the AI tool and start putting stuff in there. And I was just thinking like, at first my reaction was like, that's a horrible idea. But then I was thinking about how I use GPT. And I'm literally like, GPT, hey, this is how I'm thinking about my business. Do you think that I should be doing X, Y, Z, which is crazy. GPT has become like a god, right? Like, hey,
the be all know all.
But how do you think about leveraging it, you know, with your CTO hat, or how do you think about leveraging AI? Where does it make sense to leverage it early on? Right?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think right now, the age we're living in is probably the toughest time for technologists, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
no,
If you're a CTO, CIO,
it's the
CDO,
worst time
one
and
of
best
those,
time.
right? Yeah. There's probably three people every week coming to you
I
and
know.
emailing you about the new AI tool they want to
Yeah,
use, right?
shiny object.
And because it's seen as such an accelerator. And I can tell you in the conversations, at least in my circle, and I'll throw the CISOs in there too, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Using AI early on for ideating, for understanding concepts more, I think is incredibly powerful. I mean, the cost curve to ideate and experiment has completely almost been wiped out,
Mm-hmm.
right? To
yeah.
your point.
Mm-hmm.
I think where it gets dangerous is when people start running with those ideas, right? And say, well, look, I can create a resident app. Here you go, right? ChatGPT told me the
Done.
10 steps I need to do. Done. And so, you forget that there is an enterprise lens that you have to operate in, right? And so I love AI as a thought provoker,
Yeah.
as a conversationalist, as a, early ideation tool. Heck, use Claude's, MCP protocol, the context protocol, and some of these cool tools like Cursor. And you don't even have to, know how to build a website. You just have to know how to prompt it now to build a website too, right? So I think there's a lot of ways it can play as an accelerant. I think where you have to, as a CTO, try to articulate is, okay, when we talk about enterprise scale and the ability to leverage this across systems, the ability to maintain what I refer to as, it's not my term, but data sovereignty, right? The
Yes.
ability
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
keep your data indoors
Yep.
in your walls. It's a much different conversation.
It's really interesting. I kind of joke with my wife about this. Sometimes, like, I'll have an idea, and it's almost like the idea is like a knife that I'm running around with. It's like, I got this thing, and hey, check it out. This is great. This is,
she hasn't play proofed the house
I
yet.
know. And she's like, yeah, that's true, right? And we joked about this, and I kind of was saying, like, I have to get better at actually figuring out what am I going to do with the knife. Not just I have an amazing sharp
I'm not going to
knife.
answer that question
Right.
for you.
Like, but if you kind of step back, that's really what's happening, right? Is like,
right.
we now have this knife. People are running around with the knife, but they haven't decided, do I use the knife to go cut the wood to build a house? Like, what is...
And I think even taking that analogy further is like a Swiss Army knife.
Right.
Right.
That's
You give
even,
me a Swiss Army knife, and I have
And now
absolutely no idea which part of the knife to use for what.
Right.
And you do not want me using one either. Right.
Right.
But like to learn to use it. So I also like the idea of like, you don't want to inhibit exploration and ideation and all that stuff, but in bigger context of how it's all going to come together. Right, because I don't want to come out of this conversation like you shouldn't do that. Yes, absolutely
100%.
you should.
So I'm good to run around with the knife around my house.
No, not
and just like,
not run.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
I got a knife.
Yeah.
The running part is what kills you.
No, it's when you run into something.
So speaking of that, though, have you found any best practices to allow that and then harness it as you're going through this process?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, you want to encourage people to, use AI to expand their creativity, to, I think provide hopefully diverse points of view. Let's put the biases in AI aside for a minute, right? Let's, to be able to, think more creatively, quite frankly. I think that if you can, harness, let's say, an open AI through your Azure infrastructure, again, securely inside your walls, feeding it your HR, and company policies, allowing people to query it easily, allowing it to ask questions based on contextual information about your company. Man, that's powerful, right? Super powerful. I think where we ultimately need to figure out, and I don't know that anyone has figured this out, is how do you take all that creativity and ideation and then harness it to and really distinguish it and differentiate it for something that could ultimately scale. at an enterprise level, because now you have 1,000 ideas coming at, IT or the digital officers, that are probably all wonderful. And if you don't have a good governance model, if you don't have good
Right.
change management, again, this could be one of the toughest eras of a technologist's life and career, quite frankly.
It's interesting because I think a lot of the focus on AI ideation has been unmoored from value and outcomes, right? If you think about like I can build something very quickly.
Yeah.
How do I make sure I stay anchored in value? Like if you think about you as a CTO, and I'll back up a little bit because a lot of people won't know this, but the reason I relocated from DC out to Southern California is because of Reshma, right? And I don't even know if you knew that. I don't even know if you knew that. But a lot of it was just so much of what we were doing. We were moving so fast, and there was so much going on in Southern California, particularly around automation, intelligent automation. And so when I moved out, I remember this conversation we had. You were at Tricon, and you were really walking through your own ambition as CTO, like what you see this transformation being. But I also remember you had to anchor it in value. That conversation had to be anchored in, this is the value that doing this will get you, right, as an enterprise. So I wonder, like now with AI, if you had to go back and do that again, does it change how you think about anchoring value? Like, I'm just trying to get in the time machine a little bit with you, right?
Yeah, no, it's a great conversation, and man, hindsight is a little 2020 too, right? Because in the world of asset management, real estate, private equity, investments in general, even if you go to the venture capital space, really, what is it that you're underwriting at the end of the day? And this question should be answered by technologists as well.
Yeah.
Is what are you asking for in terms of investment? What are you trying to underwrite, right? And then what is the outcome, the return that the business and organization is going to get? And this probably jumps into a little bit of the build versus buy conversation.
Yeah.
And so, looking back, we accelerated a ton of progress because we were able to utilize out-of-the-box applications, right? And low-code platforms like the Pega platform, and be able to really, move from that very long engineering-heavy, cost-heavy timeline of build it on your own and full stack, to guys, let's go experiment, throw it out there, get it in front of the users and see what they think, and make an impact, a true bottom line impact. Now, that was even measured, I think, for the first time in my career, for sure, where, Fitch came out and said, hey, when Tricon took over, homes from a prior operator, and, when Tricon securitized that debt, Fitch came out and said their operating model is so efficient compared to the competitors, we're going to give Tricon's debt a 5% uplift. They could borrow a little cheaper.
That's crazy. So the platform that was built actually created a higher valuation.
Yeah.
That's
which I didn't even know at the time to even think about as a way to measure, right? I'm thinking application ROI. I'm thinking, total cost of ownership at an enterprise level. In hindsight being 2020, now I'm like, hey guys, there's ways to really, truly extend the underwriting conversation and technology based on what, Fitch came out and said, this is how much more, streamlined, efficient, and capable this new operator is, right? Based on their operating platform.
That's very powerful. I mean, I don't even know if AI comes into play in that conversation, because what you anchored on is the actual value. I love the terminology you use, underwrite.
Yep.
Right? Like that speaks to me as someone who believes in value. You are underwriting an asset potentially that's being created that actually creates a higher valuation. This is a whole different conversation than what most people are used to when we talk about solution design.
Yeah, and I think to that point, sorry, go ahead, Reshma.
No, 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 go.
I
I
was
mean, I
just
was
gonna,
just going to add, oh, go, please, please.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just gonna say, to the point that you made, how much does things that AI shouldn't change is exactly this piece, right? Like you can get to that thing faster and you have
Yeah,
more tools
yeah,
in your tool.
yeah.
That whole thing. This is a really good learning experience of like you might get there faster, but if you lose that concept of underwriting and the value at the center, seeing the exponential impact, like that story is incredible to me because you got something that
Amazing.
you didn't even think about, which then transforms your next project and how you're looking at
Yeah.
all of it, right? Like
Yeah.
Right,
don't lose the learnings from that and don't just focus on
right.
technology. So sorry I interrupted you.
No, no. In fact, you kind of made my point, which was,
Yeah.
at the end of all of this, right? Tools come and go. AI is absolutely here to stay and is an
Yeah.
accelerant of hopefully achieving those business outcomes and ambitions. But the underwriting of that technology, that conversation still has to happen well ahead of time if you're going to truly take advantage of the tools, because you can get caught for sure in tool hell, 10, 15 licenses for different tools, that are SaaS-based AI tools. Next thing you know, you don't even know what your underwriting is the outcome.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're having a real conversation now, right? This is a real conversation, and you're bringing up a couple themes for me. And I want to touch on both of these. But I'll put them both out, and then we can unpack. Right. Yep. One is, does the focus on user adoption go away? Right, or get diminished because, and I'm maybe playing it a couple clicks ahead, but it's this idea that value historically, when we do solution design, value is also in, let's make sure we build something that people will adopt, right? If you get low adoption right. or people don't really use it, I think the Agile stat was like, people only use 20% of the features that are built anyway, right? That's roughly like right. 20% of the features are used 80% of the time or something like that, right? So you think like, okay, from an adoption perspective, to a certain extent, the pace that you can move at with AI, almost people will struggle to adopt anyway. Like I can build all the stuff, but my users are still out here, right? That's one. Two, it's a question of, is the user still out there? Because AI, so
it could be an agent.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I guess do we need to rethink this idea of adoption as a value metric?
I think on the first piece is just because we can move fast doesn't mean we should. Right. Because I think still user adoption is important because if you build it and no one's using it, that's just a whole waste of money, even if it was cheaper because you use AI. And I think that's a really good point because, I look at projects, change management is the hardest part of a project.
I just wrote change management.
Yeah, it's like getting the user to understand it. If you're moving so fast, I think that it's valid. I think it's actually absolutely valid and more important than ever because you're going to put more stuff out and they're not going to use it. So Reshma, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with you for sure. It's a really interesting question, Clay. I hadn't really thought about. But I if you unpack it a little bit more, in the world of SaaS, we used to focus on standardization, right? Like the SaaS era optimized for application standardization. Can you centralize onto, platform X, Y, and Z, right? And get all your users to use it. I think in the AI era, the key is going to be how do you embed such that we optimize for data and data sovereignty, right? Because if you can embed the AI to really optimize your data now, your user can be an agent, your user can be a human, your user can be a hybrid thereof, right? It could be a combination of potential use cases and users, but the data and the optimization for it is, I think, the way we have to now think about where does AI sit in the architecture, in the enterprise architecture, and how do we kind of understand the way data gravity used to work in the SaaS era, right? Which is, everything, kind of headed towards the centralization of a particular application. And now, the more data accumulates in one place, the data sets create gravity, right? How can AI orchestration really, help us understand where the data already exists? How can we leverage it wherever it exists? It doesn't now have to be centralized. I think, the Snowflakes and the Databricks and all those guys are trying to make sure it sits in their world.
Right.
Really, it can sit anywhere. Right.
We
used to gravitate towards data from an application perspective. Now it really doesn't matter. So where are the users? Who are the users? Is value really user-based? Yes, but the users could be anything. And the optimization of data becomes the true measurement in my mind.
Actually, it's interesting because I think a couple of key themes there is one, I love what you're saying. The definition of a user changes.
Yep.
Right. And we talk about that a little bit in the paper is like, ultimately, you have to design for and have empathy for agents too, right? It sounds weird, but I think the other part is really, I wanted to challenge something you said, which is optimize for the data. I actually am looking at it thinking organizations will have to get more comfortable optimizing for the outcomes, right? Because that's, I think, data always, in any new technology, data becomes either an enabler or it becomes a blocker. Right. That's anytime new technology shows up, we got to figure out the data. But I think where we're going with AI, at least, some of what I'm seeing different clients working on is like, how do I actually say this is the outcome and the value I want to get? And actually AI is beginning to kind of rearrange to work towards those outcomes. Right. Yeah. It's early days, but I think that's, so when we talk about the data, we actually talked about this architecturally design is not only do you have data at the center, right? You also have the actual value driver and outcomes at the center, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think data now revolves around the values and the outcomes, right? What are all the, rich structured, maybe data sets, unstructured data sets that I can leverage in my AI embedded, right? That's going to then orchestrate and ultimately get me to the value, the core piece of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah. I do want to, right now, as we're recording this, there's a big conversation going on around the SaaS apocalypse. I don't know if you've seen this, right?
Yeah. I've seen the market stuff. I've seen.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we talked a little bit about this. I talked to a few other leaders about this of like, I think one leader I spoke with was like, it was just a weird conversation, but by the end of the conversation, he was like, yeah, everything's a threat. And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like everything's a threat? Like, what does that mean? And he's like, well, what's going on right now with AI, you can basically rebuild what Pega does, right? And I was like, sort of, but do you want to do that? Right. And that's, that's a conversation that people are having, but they're thinking 5 years out, but it could be 3 years out. But I just want to have that conversation, right? Which I know what the answer is in my mind, but I want to hear other people. Yeah. What do you think, Resh? Like,
the SaaSification, what happens to that? The moat, again, around standardization and making sure everybody was using kind of standardized tool sets in order to, operate off the same data, right? And report off of it. I think the concept of seat-based pricing is structurally threatened now, right? Yeah. Like, again, if your user is an agent, do they need a $300 a month seat, right, to operate?
If I'm feeding them,
in your platform. So I think SaaS evolves, certainly, right? The agent needs an endpoint for that SaaS. The SaaS doesn't go away, but they don't need the per seat, maybe licensing model. Maybe they need an API-based, licensing model, right? Model context protocols, that standardizes how agents connect. And so now, locking into a platform is weakened, right? Do you really need to lock in to that centralized, SaaS that, was once running everything, CRM and workflow and everything else, right? And so I think the risk for, let's just call them, the SaaS incumbents, if you will, is that they could become really expensive databases where all your data sits, right? And the more you agentify, and I know a lot of the big, SaaSes are certainly embedding AI to kind of maintain their data gravity, right, within their database. I think that ultimately what we'll see and what CTOs are going to advocate for, I hope, is that, the LLMs and the models are changing so fast that if your enterprise architecture is, built to be able to swap those out, leverage wherever your rich data sets live, then you don't have the lock-in effect. You have fewer seat licenses. You have agents doing a lot of the work based on some standardized protocols. And so I think what we're going to see is an evolution of SaaS. I don't think it's going to go away.
No. I mean, I completely agree with you. Is you need to have the flexibility to change out, and then what's also for lack of a better term, IP that you're building to, right? Like your workflows and all of the things that obviously have to bring it back to Pega in some way, but the same thing of those are the other pieces that you are bringing to the table to differentiate yourself as a business, right? That stuff is not going to go away. That's what you need to be able to focus on with being able to use the technology or the AI of the day, right? Because it's going to change.
Yeah. Do you want to be the orchestration? Do you want to build the orchestration layer?
Or
do you want to take
some people do, right? Some people do, but it's not the best use of your money.
No, exactly.
Right.
And that's what it's going to evolve. And so then it frees you up to be able to spend more time in your differentiation and focus on that piece. And then
this is where I get really excited, because solution design becomes more critical than ever. If you think about, I love what you were saying earlier, Reshma, around the collapsing of the cost around ideating. You can ideate very quickly, but then you have to start thinking through this, how do I think about this swapping out? How do I think about the orchestration? How do I think about essentially this hub and spoke? Where, you have all of these different pieces. We know we don't want to end up building crappy little apps, right? We talk about this, right? Right? We don't want that. We ideally, and this is where I'm different from a lot of people, is I don't, and now I'm preaching, so forgive me, audience, but I don't believe in this, hey, I have a tool, let's go find use cases for the tool. Right? That's one path of solution design, which I think that, can be very dangerous, but I think we're going to see that because it's so easy to ideate now. I have this cool tool. Let me go and just find opportunities. Whereas the real opportunity is what you described, is what now, forget about the tool. Now I have the confidence to underwrite bigger and bigger value projects that actually cost less, right? And so we can kind of start getting out of this, it's going to cost this much. Because when we talk about value, and I'm bad about this, but when we talk about value, I actually don't want to talk about costs. And someone kind of was beating me up on this, well, why don't you want to talk about costs? Why not talk about ROI and da-da-da? I'm like, honestly, if you're just trying to justify the investment off of the cost, you're aiming too low. Right? Doesn't mean you forget about costs, but you got to actually think about what is the ambition that I have. If your ambition is 1x, you're basically going to put in whatever $1 million and you get $1 million and 2 cents back. Hello, that doesn't make sense, right? So that's where I think we get into these very exciting scenarios that you describe, Resh, where you can actually build some compelling business cases. You can be more ambitious. You can get things underwritten that actually have an impact. That's, again, I'll step off of my
Your soapbox.
soapbox.
I love it.
But you know,
Okay, so now I'm glad I'm a CTO in this space. Clay.
We're gonna run it. I just
Right,
think
right.
that's if I could sit anywhere right now, I probably would want to sit in a CTO seat. CTO or VP of operations. I think those are going to be the two roles that have the most fun with everything that's going on. That's going to give Pega a lot of grief, But I think
We'll take it.
and I think it's going to be good for Pega, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's who's going to be running this and who's going to be calling
and
shots.
I think it's also going to be a learning curve for them, right? To rethink
Absolutely.
it, because I think, Reshma, I've learned a lot from you in the two conversations we've had, because I've not seen this perspective before. But if you embrace it, it's like, this is where solution design starts with all the lessons that we take from here, is like all of those components that you think about when you're making those decisions, and understanding that the buck starts with you.
Yes.
Right?
Mhm.
It's like, that's where it starts, in embracing that. So I think you can have a ton of fun with it, understanding it's going to be a journey and there's going to be ups and downs. But like, this viewpoint is not just about AI.
No.
It's about how that's going to influence what you should have already been thinking about your role in starting the solution design. So
Yeah, I feel
Okay.
like we've
Yeah.
come full circle, Resh. And I know Reshma, so it's like I call you Resh because
Absolutely, no problem.
but I feel like we've come full circle because again, when we first met, it was in design thinking workshop.
was,
I remember
yeah.
you saying, "Hey, that's my design thinking teacher," when we were at a Pega World.
Mhm.
I just want you to know I've learned more from you in the time that we've worked together than I think I've been able to share with you. And it's just
Oh no,
been
the
great
feeling's
to-
mutual. Absolutely, the feeling's mutual. And I think concepts like design thinking, yes, they will have to adjust. Ideation essentially gets flattened,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
To a certain degree, but still so important because the orchestration and optimization of your business and your workflows stiw has to deliver something that an end consumer can consume, right?
Exactly.
And so you still have to be able to relate to the human, if the human's consuming it, or the agent, and maybe you're now design thinking in agent mindset, right? In addition to human mindset.
Yeah.
it's great. Yep.
Well, I know we're at the end. My goodness, I think we
know.
could have gone for another hour.
Yep.
So
Just fun.
I know.
really
Oh my
fun.
God. So just want to thank you, Reshma, for joining us, and thank you, audience, for being here. And we will see you on the next episode of Design to Accelerate.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you all. Thanks, Reshma,
Thanks,
so much.
guys.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Design to Accelerate.
This is a space for thoughtful conversations about how people, not just technology, create value.
When we let human judgment lead and AI accelerate, better outcomes always follow.
Follow and subscribe to keep engaging in this meaningful conversation.